Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar today. My name is Joanne Ponchana. I'm the Senior Program Manager at PG&E for Energy Upgrade California. And we are here today to talk about the Energy Upgrade California Multifamily Pilot Program. So hopefully most people on the line, I think we had 100 registrants and I see 60, so we'll probably have some people filtering in, but I wanted to go ahead and get started. We do have I think 2 hours reserved. I don't think we're going to take the whole time, but I wanted to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions. Why don't we go ahead and advance to the next slide. All right. As for the agenda today, we're going to start with introductions. That was me, one thing down, and then move on to reviewing the PG&E Multifamily Pilot Overview. Then the program structure and high-level job process, followed by the contractor and rater participation requirements and next steps, and then have questions. I will be looking at the chat function, so if you do have any clarifying questions while I'm talking through this agenda, please feel free to enter into the chat, and I'll try to address it as we go, and then we'll pause for questions at the end. The hope for today is really to give you that 5,000 or 50,000 foot view so that people who are working in Energy Upgrade California as a rater or contractor or our industry and local government partners could get an understanding of what we are doing. This is in no way going to provide you every detail that is needed for participating in the pilot program, and that will be reserved and gone through a lot more detail in future trainings that I'll talk about a little bit later. So hopefully this gives you just enough to be dangerous. Why don't we go ahead and go on to the next slide. All right. So here is a high-level overview of the pilot process. For those of you who aren't aware, PG&E and actually the other investor-owned utilities in the state of California all filed an advice letter over a year ago now asking for permission to perform these multifamily pilots, and recently, just a little over a month ago, got permission based on these phases that we're laying out in the slide in front of you. The first stage, which is where we are now, and I'll go into more detail, is a 500-unit pilot, and that is going to be running starting in January and running through December. The second phase is taking the information from that pilot starting in late 2013 and moving into the first quarter of 2014 to identify the lessons learned, what worked, what didn't work, hear from participants so that we can make sure to have the best program possible out on the streets in phase 3 when we have a territory-wide program rollout in the middle of 2014. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. As I mentioned to you, the EUC pilot is a phased approach in those 3 phases I mentioned, and it will be targeting multifamily retrofit market, and we define multifamily for these purposes as 5 or more units. And as many of you are aware, we currently allow single family and 2 to 4 units in the existing program, and that will continue unchanged. Another goal for this pilot is to test the market at a reasonable scale. As I mentioned earlier, we have 500 units, which we believe will be somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 buildings. Of those buildings, we plan to test a variety of configurations from low-rise to high-rise and various different shared or individual systems so that we get a better understanding moving forward. We also want to be testing and using our single point of contact. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later, but we think that this approach will help ensure that customers, owners, and managers have access to the variety of energy efficiency resources for multifamily properties, including incentives, support and assistance, and financing. Next, we want to test the performance-based approach to help property managers and owners make decisions. As many of you may be aware, the programs that PG&E has run in the past are largely prescriptive, so this performance-based approach is a new way of looking at the multifamily building as a system. And finally, with the pilot, we want to make sure that we are integrating with existing program offerings. for those of you who aren't familiar, we have the Energy Savings Assistance Program, which is our low-income weatherization program, and they deal with the various units of multifamily properties. We also have our Multifamily Energy Efficiency Rebate Program, which offers single measures from pool pumps, pool heaters, to exit signs, lighting, and central system replacements. And we also have our Middle Income Direct Install, which, similar to the Energy Savings Assistance Program, does weatherization on those moderate income units and some common areas. And then there's also a variety of local government offerings that we'd like to try to work with and leverage as well. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide. So what we're hoping to get out of the next year, as I mentioned, we plan to start this pilot in January with retrofits completed by the end of 2013 for those 500 units. We really hope to see and achieve a deeper energy savings per building with a target of 10 to 20% or greater reduction. We plan to offer a broader suite of measures than the typical BEAM programs I mentioned earlier, and make sure that when we go deeper that we're being cognizant of how those various measures interact with one another. We're also providing an improved property owners and managers' understanding of the benefits of whole building approach, in addition to the tenants where feasible. Also looking at the potential use of online tools that will help with ongoing building maintenance or understanding the return on investment for those owners. Also, very importantly, to get a better understanding of combustion safety as relates to the comprehensive, non-prescriptive multifamily retrofits. And in general, take the lessons learned to inform the full program rollout. Why don't we go ahead to the next slide? All right, one other thing I do want to mention before I move on to the program structure is that, as you notice, we have a pretty tight time frame. We've got about a year to launch this pilot and complete all the retrofits. And for those of you who work on large multifamily projects, that can be pretty difficult. So we are looking to identify these 5 to 10 buildings probably by April with a waiting list. And that's why we're having this webinar today and have some training coming up over the next month to really try to drive that timeline and make sure that we can get as much done as quickly as possible so that we can learn from it and launch the full program that will be available territory-wide. All right, we can go ahead to the next slide. So we are still working on the exact rebate values and figures for our incentive structure, but what we do know is that we will have a rebate that will cover partial costs of the investment grade audit or assessment. We did hear through a lot of stakeholders and also through pilots that are going on throughout the state that the cost of an investment grade assessment for large buildings that can be $10,000 plus has been a big challenge or big barrier to participation. So we do plan to cover part of the cost of those investment grade assessments, but with the goal of trying to drive retrofits, so not just offering that type of coverage or full coverage to anyone. So doing it in a little bit smarter of a manner. Also, we do know that the rebates will be based on the building energy reduction multiplied by the number of units. So if you reach 10, 15, 20% tiers, that will be multiplied by the number of units treated to give you the total rebate number for that building. And the incentives will be tiered to drive deeper retrofits. So as you hit the 25, 30 plus categories, the incentives will increase more than at a steady increment. As I mentioned before, the incentive amounts are still under development, and we are looking at what has been in place in Alameda County, Sacramento with SMUD, San Diego, and programs across the country to really try to find a sweet spot for incentives. But that will be something that we'll be looking at as the pilot progresses to see if those incentives are the right amount to really drive action. So why don't we go ahead and move on to the next slide. So similar to our existing program, we will be using modeled energy savings as the as the main part of the program. And as you see here, we've identified 2 different softwares that we'll be leveraging. For the low-rise or 3 or less floor multifamily buildings, we'll be using the Energy Pro residential performance model. And please note that if there is a garage below the units, that does not count as a floor or level. For the high-rise, which is 4 or more floors, we will be using the Energy Pro non-residential module. And for the use of these, we will be offering additional training and mentoring to make sure that people are familiar with how these work. But also, as I will go through later, we are trying to engage people in this program who do have at least a cursory understanding of how these softwares work. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide. So now with that high-level overview, we're going to talk a little bit about owner eligibility. So the property owners, managers, or account holders are eligible for multifamily buildings. For the pilot only, we are asking that they are both gas and electric service customers. But once we roll out the full program, we will be looking to offer to single fuel customers. As I mentioned earlier, the buildings have to have a minimum of 5 units. We are looking at buildings that have both affordable and market rate tenants or designations. And we will be working with our Energy Savings Assistance Program and Moderate Income Direct Install programs to make sure that the customer gets the most benefit for the building and the tenants. Similar to the existing program, buildings with propane in the combustion zone will not be eligible during the pilot. And customers must work with participating raters and contractors to do the assessments and work. And finally, this is actually a very important one that we need to make sure to communicate up front with customers, is that we do need to have access to all units, not only for the installation, although some units may not have measures installed, but also for quality assurance and safety purposes. Why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about that single point of contact that I mentioned earlier on. So the single point of contact is a designated PG&E staff person whose role is to work directly with the homeowner and manager to decide which programs are best for them and helps them meet their goal and budget. So that long list of programs I mentioned earlier, as you can imagine, would be hard for a customer to navigate by themselves. So the single point of contact will make sure that they really understand everything that's available to them. In addition to just the programs and incentives, the single point of contact will also be helping connect the homeowner with financing programs. Financing programs including both utility and non-utility offerings. They'll also be assisting the owner through the enrollment, construction, and in-field quality assurance process, just really being there in case they have questions or concerns. And most importantly, at the end, making sure that the customer gets the appropriate rebates upon completion of work. And why don't we go ahead and move on to the next slide, where I'm going to walk you through the high-level overview of the job application process. So as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, there's a lot of details that we are leaving out or still developing. So this is really that high-level 50,000-foot look at this. And if you decide that participation is right for you or your business, there will be additional trainings to get through the nitty-gritty and details of how the program will work. So first, there will be a pre-qualification of property owners, and that can be done by either the single point of contact or the program participant. That will be followed up by a phone-based clipboard assessment to walk through a series of questions and make sure that the customer is really interested in a comprehensive assessment, does have, some sort of funding available or that will be available, and, mostly isn't just looking for a few lighting retrofits. The next step is an investment grade assessment, and this will include, among other things, a walkthrough of all the different configurations of the building to understand how many 2-bedroom, 1-bath, how many, studios, etc. which will help inform the combustion appliance safety testing that will be done based on the program sampling rates, based on the different types of configurations and appliances that are found during the walkthrough. Number 4 is quality assurance and test-in, which may be in conjunction with step 3 and application quality control. So it's mostly working with the Build Green staff to make sure that everything is in line. And then step 5, the rater or contractor will submit the audit incentive request. And step 6, the improvements will be installed to program specifications, followed by quality assurance and test out and application quality control. Once all the work and application information is complete and to the program standards, they'll be submitted for an incentive request. With that, we'll go ahead and move into a little bit more detail on the safety and quality assurance that will be in the pilot program. So we are aligning with Building Performance Institute, BPI, Home Energy Rating System, HERS 1 and 2. We'll also be doing mentoring in field and during test-in, test-out, order, and construction, and also in the office helping with making sure that the energy model is correct and that the scope makes sense for that property. There will also be pre-work and post-installation desktop review of the applications and the models. There will be combustion appliance safety tests performed by a BPI building analyst for all jobs. And there will be pre- and post-field inspections. And as I mentioned earlier, those can be in conjunction with test-in and test-out to minimize the impact on the tenants and owners. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next section. Now we've kind of covered the overview of the pilot, what it is, what the goals are, also a little bit more detail on the structure and program flow. Now we're going to talk a bit about how contractors and raters can participate and the various qualifications and training needed. So this is just an overview of what we need to work through, and I'll go into more details in these areas. One, that the participant needs to submit documentations for review that demonstrate that they meet the qualifications that I'll lay out. Participants need to attend an orientation webinar, which we'll be offering on demand via the internet. They'll also need to participate in a 5-day training or have already completed an equivalent training. They will need to sign a multifamily pilot addendum, which will be an add-on to the current participation agreement. And actually, one of the things that I think is most important, and I want to make sure that anyone who's interested in participating in the pilot understands, is that you really need to agree to provide PG&E and Build a Green feedback throughout this process and participate in focus groups, because the goal of this pilot really is to learn and improve so that the full program works better for everyone. All right, we'll go ahead to the next slide. And here are some more details on the application and screening. As I mentioned, we will have that on-demand webinar. The verification of various professionals will require the participation agreement addendum, insurance and bonding as appropriate, and they will follow the same standards as a single-family program. Contractor license in the appropriate specialty, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in a couple slides. Evidence of being in business for 2 years, list of sales personnel, CSLB registration numbers, and background checks for all people with access to the customer premise. Also, one of the things that we're looking to ensure that the raters and contractors will be well-versed in evaluating multifamily buildings and developing appropriate scopes of work for energy improvements. We also hope that they will be versed in energy modeling, particularly Energy Pro software, have a good understanding of combustion appliance safety testing, and verifying the quality of completed work, including conducting post-installation verification tests. So with that in mind, those general knowledge requirements will be there are a few qualifications that we're looking for. You'll see that these are labeled draft rater qualifications. We are looking for feedback in this area, but this is the starting point of what we feel is adequate and necessary. And we've broken it down to different functions of the job, and then the qualifications needed to perform those functions. And we do anticipate that with these multifamily properties, a lot of times there will be teams of raters and contractors working together to perform these retrofits and testing. However, there is an option for it to be one firm who does the testing and the contracting work, and as long as they meet the details that I'll lay out in this slide and the next slide. So for the function of, we'll go back one more. For the function of energy modeling and data analysis, the rater must have either HERS 2, ResNet, BPI Multifamily BA, or the Certified Energy Plans Examiner certification. For the whole building energy audit, scope of work development recommendations, and third-party verification portion, they need to have 2 or more of those trainings listed on the right-hand side. And finally, for the combustion appliance safety testing, as mentioned before, they need to be a BPI building analyst to be performing that, or be on staff at an accredited company. Now we can move on to the draft contractor qualifications. So as you see here, once again listed by function and qualification, we have HVAC system evaluation and testing. In order to do that, there must be a California Field Verification and Diagnostics Testing Rater. Optional is to be a building analyst, although highly recommended. To perform central domestic water heating and distribution system efficiency, they need to have a CSLB contractor's C36 plumbing or C4 boiler license. And we also recommend that they're a BPI multifamily building analyst. For structural evaluations, they must be a licensed engineer, and electrical system evaluation must be a licensed electrician. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and go into the next step with multifamily training. So as I mentioned, we are moving along quite quickly, and so we will be offering one 5-day free of charge training class that goes over the BPI multifamily exam and the Beta HERS 2 multifamily requirements. And that training will be from Tuesday, February 5th to Tuesday, February 12th in Stockton. And for additional costs, if people are interested, they can do an additional 6-day and get Greenpoint rated multifamily existing building certification training and testing. And so while we are only offering this one training, this same training had been offered several times throughout the state as part of some of the ERA initiatives, and people who have taken that training and meet the other certifications will also be eligible, which I think is a list of 60 or so folks, in addition to the people who attend this training. And while this will be the key training, we do want to point out that there'll be additional supplemental training and mentoring as needed, or as we, determine that there's a gap in knowledge. And so, before I open up to questions, I know that we have, what do we have now? 88 people on the phone, many of which are raters and contractors who are interested in participating. We went over some of the qualifications and training needs. I do also want to point out that obviously with only 5 to 10 buildings in the pilot, we will be looking for people who can help us hit the ground running, help us identify potential candidates at different locations throughout our service territory, and as I mentioned earlier, are really willing to help guide the process, inform the pilot as it moves forward so that we can make the full program that much better when it launches in 2014. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up to questions. I don't see any questions on the chat, but I think we should be able to figure out how to open up the line to ask questions on the phone.
Hey, Joanne, we actually do have some questions on the question panel.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I'm not seeing them. Oh, well.
Okay, I can read them off to you.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Okay, the first question is, do we as a company or contractor have to be certified through BPI as a multi-unit building contractor to participate for the 5+ unit rebate program through EUC?
So why don't we go ahead and scroll back a few slides to the draft contractor qualifications. And so as you see here, for the contractor installing the work, they do not have to have BPI certification in either the building analyst or multifamily building analyst, although it's recommended. However, to perform the rating functions, there are a few where BPI certification is required, such as combustion safety testing, or is an option with the energy audits and energy modeling.
Okay, does the garage count as a floor or unit if a part of it has been converted to an office?
Interesting. So the idea for this multifamily pilot is it would be residential only. So to the extent that it's a in-home office, that would probably be eligible. To the extent that it's a commercial office, mixed-use buildings will not be as part of this pilot.
Okay. Can we get a copy of the slide presentation?
You certainly can, and I believe this recording and presentation will also be posted online.
Can you email separately the long list of programs, please?
So I assume what you're meaning, you meant by that is the Energy Savings Assistance Program, Moderate Income Direct Install, etc. And I think that we could, I don't know if I have it readily available, but what we can do is put together a document, kind of a resource list of those programs, and post it to the resource library. So, you know, we can expect that maybe within the next week or two, and we'll include a link to that in our next newsletter so that you can find it if it doesn't come, if you don't find it earlier.
Are you saying that PG&E staff persons handles rebates, financing, etc. now rather than the contractor?
So I think what you're referencing is the single point of contact. So the single point of contact is really there as an education piece for the homeowner. They do not facilitate the application submissions or the filling out of paperwork. They're mostly there to make sure that the customer understands everything that's available to them and provide support as needed in terms of questions or complaints throughout the process.
Who does the clipboard assessment?
So and Jane, I think is on the phone, she can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the clipboard assessment would be done by the program participant, so either the rater, the person who's filling the rater function.
And who does the walkthrough?
That would also be done by the person fulfilling the rater function as part of the commercial grade audit.
Can you make the software available to do the energy modeling?
So the software does need to be purchased by the company in order to have the license to be able to use the software. So we will not be purchasing software licenses.
What is the equivalent to the 5-day training?
It is actually, I think it had the exact same name, the California Multifamily Existing Training, or CAMFEB, that occurred. There's several different sessions over the last year or so, and it was, I believe, a 6-day training as well. And we do have a list of those, so if you're not sure if that was something that you've already taken, you can contact Builder Green or myself, and we can look you up on that list.
Does this webinar count as the orientation?
It does not. As I mentioned earlier in the phone call, this is really the high-level overview. The orientation will have the details of what you need to participate in terms of how to submit documentation, when to do it, what boxes to check, etc. A lot more detail.
As a general contractor, can you use a subcontractor for hot water if we're not certified with a specific license, but use a sub who is?
Yes, you may, as long as that subcontractor or whoever's doing the work meets the requirements.
Will you provide leads for us to contact?
No, so for the pilot, as I mentioned, since we're targeting about 5 to 10 buildings, we do have a few people who have raised their hands, which we might help corral to the right folks in their area, but for the most part, we're looking for the raters and contractors to bring the leads with them. Sorry, one thing to add to that. Since it is such a small pilot, we do plan to have a website that customers can go to validate that the program exists, but there won't be marketing outreach since it's such a small target demographic.
When and how can we register for the multifamily training?
That's a very good question, and I don't know if someone from Build It Green can mention, to let us know if that will be available on the website or how to register for that training.
Yes, it will be available on the website.
We're gonna post it on the website, and they'll go through our events page.
Okay. You'll be able to. We're going to post it on the website, and you'll be able to find it on our events page.
Great, thank you. So for those of you who aren't familiar, you can go to the events page and then look at that week in February and should be able to find it.
Does this include condos and co-ops?
Yes, currently we're allowing any type of ownership structure. However, because of the tight time frame, as I mentioned earlier, we are hoping to have all these projects identified and bought in to a certain extent by April. So for HOAs and condos, that's usually pretty difficult to get things approved with that speed. Also, we want to make sure that we have access to each unit, so there would have to be a little bit of extra work in terms of ensuring access. In general, with multifamily, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there's a little bit more of an incentive for management companies or even master metered properties to participate just because they will share the benefit of their investment. But we're certainly open to multiple ownership structures if we can figure out how to make that work for the customers.
Is there a max on unit numbers?
There is not a max on unit numbers. I think that we would not do more than one building that's very large just because we do have a limit to the number of units and we wouldn't want the whole pilot to be one building, but right now there isn't a maximum.
What is the utility financing? Is there a residential on bill financing, and what are the terms, length, and interest rate?
So the utility financing pilots are still under development, but what has been proposed and will hopefully be accepted is a pilot for multifamily financing that would dovetail with this program very nicely, and the rates haven't been set yet, but would offer a reasonable interest rate and either on-bill financing or on-bill repayment to help make this more appealing to multifamily property owners. And so that will be one of the things that single point of contact will help with, and hopefully as we learn more as that proceeding continues to unroll, that we'll be providing updates to everyone about those various pilots.
During the pilot program, who will initially locate the prospective multifamily units?
So there's a couple different routes that we've identified for selecting multifamily properties, although part of the fun of the pilot is seeing how that actually works out. We do have some customers that will come to us through our existing other programs I mentioned, whether it be our weatherization programs, our single measure programs, or just otherwise interested and might contact PG&E, so that's one route. However, we think that the most common route will be that they are leads that are brought by the rater or contractor, somebody that they've worked with in the past, or that they've recruited into the program.
Can the rate function be done by a BPI analyst?
So why don't we go back one more slide to the draft rater qualifications. And as you see, there are 3 different functions laid out, and a BPI building analyst can fill all those functions. With the exception of the whole building energy audit recommendations, third-party verification, we do ask that they have one additional qualification in addition to the BPI multifamily building analyst. But that role is definitely will be beneficial to the program.
What is the cost of the software?
I don't know off the top of my head. The low-rise building software is one that you should already probably own if you're participating in the advanced package. I'm not sure how much it costs for the additional non-residential module for the 4 more unit buildings. I don't know if anyone at the Building Green staff has any insight on that.
I think it starts at $500. We actually have to look at whether there's additional costs beyond just that base rate.
Yeah, the modules cost.
All right, thank you.
Is the rebate offerings and financing assignable by the property owner to the contractor?
So the financing, that would be a challenge to assign to the contractor. The PG&E pilot that we're looking at would be the account holder would be the one with the financing in most cases. For the rebate or incentive, I think we are definitely open to that, particularly for the commercial grade assessment rebate. And so that would be something that we'd be looking to explore during the pilot, and are definitely open to that.
Let's see. I am a certified multifamily existing home Greenpoint rater. Can I take the 5-day training as a refresher?
Yes, you certainly can. The sign up, I believe, is going to be first come, first serve, but we will limit the number of people from any given organization since we just have the one training. But if that's something that you'd like to take to refresh your skills, we'd definitely welcome it.
We have a comment. CalCerts did this training with HMG. If you want to let people know who may qualify, people that did our training would qualify.
Great, thank you.
Can a B license suffice for working on water and electric?
So a B licensed person can be the lead. You still need the appropriate licensing or qualifications based on the scope as dictated by the CSLB and various code jurisdictions. So, we're definitely open to, one of the good things about being in a pilot is that we, expect to be learning as we go. And so if there's a circumstance that we hadn't thought of in terms of a licensing requirement or function, we're definitely open to hearing suggestions and reviewing it and making decisions based on that information.
How and what process will you select contractors for the pilot?
So any contractor or rater is eligible for the pilot. If you are already an existing contractor or rater in our program, the amount of work you have to do is significantly less, because if you do want to, if you're not currently in the program, we'd have to enroll and then do the steps for the multifamily pilot. But we don't have a limit on raters or contractors as long as they meet the qualifications.
I have a customer with an 8-unit building in San Francisco that is quite old. Can it participate in the program?
So assuming that that you meet the qualifications to participate and want to bring that lead in, the plan for what we're doing currently is we have or are developing a list of the different types of configurations and climate zones or temperature zones that we want to test. so that we can make sure the pilot really informs the full program rollout, meaning that we don't want to do only 8-unit buildings in San Francisco because that wouldn't show us what the full population looks like. So we're putting together that list, and what we'd like to see is that the contractors and raters who do have leads, and bring them to us, share with us the details, and kind of on a first-come, first-served basis as a building meets those qualifications, then we'll kind of check that off the list, and that will be one of the ones that has kind of first go at it. I would like to also point out that there will be some multifamily offerings from the Bay Regional Energy Network, or Bay REN, that would cover San Francisco. So if for some reason you don't get into the pilot, there are potentially other offerings for you, and hopefully there'll be more information coming out about how that will work in the coming months.
Will the training information be on the Build It Green site or PG&E site? It'll be on www.builditgreenutility.org, and it's on this page that you'll be able to see the events web page as well as the resource library. Another question about the PowerPoint presentation and questions on this call. The PowerPoint presentation will be sent out, as mentioned by Joanne earlier, and also the questions answered during this presentation is being recorded, so this should be up on builditgreenutility.org as well on the resource page. Will the QA person or PG&E point contact person be available for the clipboard interview or walkthrough evaluation?
Yes. Obviously, we'll just need to make sure that we have some lead time.
Can you show the list of approved upgrades?
So approved upgrades. So I'm assuming that you're referring to what measures can be installed, such as HVAC, water heating, etc. And I don't. We are working on getting that list together. I don't think we have it solidified. That would be something that would come out in the training. But just for your reference, they would be all the big ticket items, such as central heating, cooling, boiler systems, water heating systems that are also in unit, windows, insulation, some of the most common measures. If there's anything that you are particularly concerned about being eligible, please feel free to chime in or send it to us by email or making a follow-up phone call, and we'll make sure to add that to our considerations.
When will rater and property owner incentives be announced? Raters and contractors will need to convey incentives in order to bait property owners.
I agree, and we do hope to get those incentives out soon. I would like to point out that you shouldn't be baiting customers or offering them incentives yet until you are participating in the program. And so as part of that participation, we will go into detail on that. But for general awareness, we do hope to have those incentives out by our official launch in January.
Will each property have a SPOC?
Oh. Single point of contact, aka SPOC. Yes, each property will have a single point of contact, and for the purposes of the pilot, it'll probably be the same person for all properties, since we're only dealing with about 5 to 10 buildings.
When potential customers come to PG&E, what factors determine which contractor receives the lead?
So that's a very good question. Most likely, and this is me thinking on the fly a little, so feel free to offer alternate suggestions, but that we'd look at what the customer is interested in and provide them with a list of all the raters and contractors who serve their area that are participating. And it would, the customer would have the ability to decide which business or businesses best fit their needs.
Do I understand then that the B license exceeds the minimum requirement for a C license?
I wouldn't necessarily put it that way, but if there is a C licensed person doing the appropriate C licensed contractor, or if you also hold those licenses doing that appropriate scope of work, then that's sufficient.
And we have a comment here that the base module for Energy Pro from the EnergySoft website is $200.
There you go. The longer we talk about it, the cheaper it gets.
As per CSLB rule, a general contractor can perform any trade as long as more than one trade is being performed.
Yes, and so we are, for this program, really following the CSLB license requirements. So in the case that that is part of the scope, then that would be appropriate.
I have a 32-unit apartment in Red Bluff. Would they be able to participate?
So it depends. My understanding is Red Bluff, parts of Red Bluff are served by PG&E gas but not electric. Assuming that they have both PG&E gas and electric, they'd be eligible potentially. Based on the discussion earlier, we will be looking at all the different leads and trying to divide the various configurations to make sure that we hit all the target property types. But if they have both gas and electric, then they could certainly be part of that evaluation.
If you have already submitted information such as insurance documents, background checks, etc. for the advanced program, do we need to submit the information again for multifamily?
No, you do not. You'll just need to submit the additional documentation such as a multifamily building analyst or HERS 2 rater or whatever the additional qualification needs are. You need to submit that documentation and sign an addendum to the existing participation agreement.
Who should I contact to bring a project to the program?
So that's a great question. For contractors, Build a Green will continue to be your primary contact, and so I'd recommend bringing it to them. And I don't know if we can post maybe in the chat or something the contact person at Build a Green that they should be reaching out to, or the contact information.
Are you saying that you are not going to accept any 5+ unit buildings?
I'm not sure I understand the question. For the multifamily pilot, it will only be building 5 units or more buildings. For the existing single-family program that will continue to operate as is, it includes buildings with up to 4 units.
Can we get a list of the current contractors?
So all the participating contractors are listed on the statewide website, energyupgradecalifornia.com. So hopefully that is sufficient.
Will the single point of contact assist the contractor with questions throughout the process?
So that's a great question. So the single point of contact is really designed as a customer resource, whereas similar to what we're already doing with the single-family program is Build a Green will be the key contractor contact and resource, so they'll be able to help you out with questions related to the energy modeling, the application, scope of work, etc.
Will solar be one of the upgrades considered?
Another great question. So for PG&E's Energy Upgrade California program, the solar thermal and solar PV are not eligible measures. However, PG&E does offer incentives for those through other programs and can certainly help connect you to those additional rebates if that's something that the customer is looking for.
Will you announce when you've selected all the units for the pilot?
So for those of you who are participating, we will certainly be keeping you up to date on what type of configurations or locations we're looking for. For privacy reasons, we can't tell you which building or which customer decided to participate, but we will be keeping an update so that you know if the incentives or number of units has been fulfilled, so that you don't offer that to other customers.
Has Sonoma County formed a separate utility company, and if so, would that affect their participation in PG&E rebate programs?
So that's a little bit out of the scope of today's discussion on the multifamily pilot. And I'm not familiar enough to speak about that competently, but I can say that people in Sonoma County are eligible for this pilot.
Are units with SMUD electricity eligible?
Units with SMUD electricity or any electricity besides PG&E are not eligible for the pilot, although we will be looking to expand once we get to that full program rollout in middle of 2014 to single fuel customers.
Okay. I think this question was just rephrased. Will you accept any 5+ unit building that has PG&E, both gas and electric? It sounds like we're being selective on which buildings may participate based on geographic location and other factors. Is this correct?
Yes, this is correct. So since we have a limited number of units for the pilot, we really want to make sure that we meet those pilot goals that I laid out earlier, and with that means testing different configurations and different climate zones. So we're putting together a list of what those configurations and climate zones are, and we'll be trying to get the biggest distribution across those building types within the pilot. So that means that not everyone who is eligible can participate, at least in the pilot stage.
Okay, and that's the end of the questions that we have on the panel. Oh, actually one more. When is the pilot ending?
So construction, we're asking that construction for the pilot projects be done by December of 2013, so the end of 2013. And then we'll be launching sometime in the middle of 2014 the full pilot, or the full program.
And that's the end of the questions.
All right, and could someone from Build a Green, I don't know if you've typed in the contact information or want to share that verbally, so if people have follow-up questions about enrollment, they know who to contact.
They can send any questions via email, info@builditgreenutility.org.
Great, thank you. All right, are there any other questions? All right, well, it looks like there aren't any other questions. I wanted to thank everyone who was on the phone today for participating and for asking such great questions. I know that myself and the others at PG&E and Build a Green are really excited to be launching this multifamily whole building pilot, and even more exciting for the learnings that will come from this to inform the full territory-wide launch, so that hopefully we can really help address this segment being multifamily existing buildings that has really been underserved by energy efficiency programs in the past. So thank you all for participating, and certainly feel free to contact us if you have any follow-up questions or would like to participate.